give a warm welcome back to really Georgia sports in general, because Georgia sports, obviously you look at the Georgia Bulldogs and Atlanta's pro sports team. So we're looking at the Braves, we're looking at the Falcons, and we're looking at the Hawks and the Georgia Bulldogs. Atlanta sports fans have been through a lot for a long time, obviously going back to Super Bowl 51. I hate to bring this up, but I'm not going to mention the score because I'm sure you guys have heard enough of that. That whole thing happened. You had Georgia losing in the national championship to Alabama after getting a huge sack to force it to put Georgia in a very, very, very good spot to look like they're going to win the national championship. Obviously, then Tua just unloads the ball to Devontae Smith, and the rest is history. Then you go into, what else can we talk about? The Braves in the postseason last year, going up 3-1 against the LA Dodgers in looking to clinch a World Series spot, and they blow a 3-1 lead. Even the Hawks this year, like the Hawks, obviously they did a lot better than everyone expected them to, and they look like they're a team on the rise, but they were close at making the NBA championship too. Lots of heartbreak constantly going on in Georgia sports, and of course the Georgia Bulldogs are no exception to that. Obviously I talked about the national championship, but just years and years and years and years it seems like for Georgia sports that the Bulldogs have been the team that has had all the expectation that they're going to be the team, that this is their year. 2018, the SEC championship game came down to the wire, and obviously Jalen Hurts had other plans and screwed that up. 2019, they go up against LSU in the SEC championship. They get blown out there. 2020, they don't even make the SEC championship because they blow the game to Florida. Georgia has always seemed like they're that team that is one piece away or one step away from being one of the top tier teams in all of college football. They've always been a great team in college football the last 5 or so years. They've always been one of the better teams, but they have yet to enter that elite tier range. And then we flash forward to 2021. The Georgia Bulldogs, they're getting their starting quarterback back. They get JT Daniels back. Just when it seems like everything is on the rise for Georgia, they go into the transfer portal. They grab a guy like Tyke Smith. They grab a guy like Darian Kendrick. They grab a guy like Eric Gilbert. Just as it seems like Georgia football is on the rise for this big Clemson game, it all crashes when you start dealing with injuries, when Eric Gilbert obviously leaves, when you have guys like Tyke Smith, I mentioned his name, he's out, when you have guys like Blaylock out, when you got guys like Darnell Washington out, when you got all these different guys out for Georgia. Carius Jackson also out. You had George Pickens out since the beginning of the offseason. He's been out for a while. It seemed like Georgia football at that point was going back down. After all the hype and excitement and everyone saying, oh, Georgia's missing way too many pieces in this game to be able to beat Clemson, Georgia goes out and plays one of the best defensive college football games that I have witnessed in some time. Like, this Georgia defense is something very, very special. And you start to get the sense. I hate overreacting because I did it last year with Mississippi State and started talking all about them and how good of a team that they were going to be for the rest of the season. And then they finished out to be one of the worst teams in all the SEC last year. But this Georgia football team, you just feel like something's different. Offensively, now I want to talk about them offensively for a second. Georgia didn't score any points offensively. Clemson didn't score any points offensively. I mean, any touchdowns offensively. Obviously, they both kicked a field goal each, but that 7 points that Georgia did score was off of a Chris Smith touchdown pick six, and I watched that play live in this South Carolina student section. Unbelievable. I started going crazy. Our whole student section started going crazy, or everyone around me, because obviously we were all cheering for Georgia in that game, but this was a defensive game for Georgia, but I want to touch on the offense because JT Daniels in this game went 22 for 30, 135 yards, no touchdowns, 1 interception, and a QBR of 67.2. Now, I mentioned it before, all the weapons on the outside he was missing, but I want to say this about both teams. And for all of you guys listening, do not make your judgment on these offenses because of this game. Because not every single week you are going to be going up against a top-tier defense. And by top-tier, I mean a top 3, top 2 defense in all of college football week in and week out. The defenses that we saw in this game that was played last night, the amount of NFL talent, the amount of Sunday talent, the amount of guys that you are going to hear their names on Sundays in the upcoming years is immense. Like, these defenses were this was one of the best defensive games. You saw some of the best defensive players that you may ever see in college football in this game. So please do not judge both of these offenses. I'm talking about Georgia's offense and I'm talking about Clemson's offense. Even though I hate Clemson, And DJ, I'm not the biggest fan of. You cannot make your judgment based off of this game because they were going up against top tier defenses. Obviously, both of these teams are going to get into the rest of the schedule now. Both of them are going to go out and play against weaker defenses and really get their offenses kick-started. But this was not the game to start out for on. If you're trying to establish an offense, this was not the game that you want week one on your schedule. But defensively, Georgia's defensive line, Georgia's really defensive line and linebackers, even their secondary, it was just a collective amazing game for Georgia. It's as simple as that. Nakobe Dean had one of the best games that I've seen. Like, let me pull up his stat sheet. He had 5 total tackles. He had 3 solos with 2 sacks and 2 tackles for losses. Nakobe Dean had an unbelievable game last night. He was absolutely amazing. On top of that, the other guys that got sacks, first of all, Georgia had 7 sacks in this game. 7 sacks against a Clemson offensive line, which obviously Clemson was bringing some new guys in that offensive line, but that's where the mismatch was in this game, and Georgia did more than take advantage of that. So you also had Adam Anderson taking advantage. He got a sack. You had Trayvon Walker getting a sack. You had Jordan Davis getting a sack. You had Nolan Smith getting a sack, and you had Jalen Carter getting a sack. All these guys were able to get to the quarterback, and they were constantly putting pressure on DJ Uiagalelei, and that's why you just take a look at his stat sheet real quick. DJ Uiagalelei in this game, 19 for 37, 178 yards, 1 interception, and a QBR of 36.7. That says a lot about where Georgia's going defensively because this is a good offense. 0 touchdowns scored. This team bent sometimes. Clemson was able to get into Georgia territory. Like I mentioned it before, Chris Smith's pick 6, they were on the Georgia 30. They bent, but they didn't break, and obviously they didn't break because they took it back to the house for a pick 6, and then even when Clemson kicked the field goal, even when Clemson was marching down into Georgia territory late in that game, Georgia was able to hold. So this defense has been showing immense talent. What's next for Georgia? What is next for Georgia? Because we look at their schedule. They play UAB next week. They play South Carolina. They go to Vanderbilt. They play Arkansas. And you really don't play another big-time matchup. First of all, you're not going to play anything to the same magnitude of playing Clemson. You don't play a big-time matchup till I say, week 6, October 9th, when you go to Auburn. Obviously, that's going to be a road test. It's not going to be easy, but if Georgia's able to keep playing like this team, regardless of what happens in the SEC championship, I don't see how this team doesn't make the SEC championship at this point. Again, I don't want to overreact too much because this team's only played one game. Anything can happen still, but what this team was able to do defensively is very, very promising. They're the best team in the SEC East, and I have a strong opinion that these guys are a serious contender to compete with Alabama. It's easy. Alabama 1, Georgia 2 in the AP right now. That's what I think it should be. The AP, at this moment that I'm speaking right now, the AP poll has not come out yet, but I think it is so easy. Alabama 1, Georgia 2, and these two teams are going to be meeting up in the national championship in January or whatever, December 31st. That's the playoff, so they're going to be meeting up at some point in the playoff. It's as simple as that. That's where I think Georgia's at right now because this defense, man, even the offense is going to get going once they start getting their weapons back and everything like that. Once they start going up, they're going to play UAB next week. That's their week to finally score a touchdown offensively, first of all, and they're going to start getting JT Daniels going. First of all, the rushing game yesterday, Zamir White had an absolutely unbelievable game. Really, as a whole, the team had an unbelievable game. If you look at the rushing stats for Georgia compared to what Clemson had yesterday, I'm just going to pull them up right now. Georgia rushed for 121 yards. Clemson rushed for 2 yards. Again, shout out to Georgia's defensive line. 2 yards? You're telling me that the same Clemson team that was so high on Will Shipley and all the guys that they had coming in at the running back position and their offensive line, and that they were not only going to be a team to throw it this year, but also run the football? 2 rushing yards on the ground for Clemson. If that doesn't say something to you, I don't know what was. But this Georgia running back room, I touched on them a bit, 121 yards. That's decent. Going up against Clemson's defensive line, who, after Georgia's defensive line, I think Clemson has the second best defensive line in all of college football. I think there's no question about it. So right now, my opinion on the Georgia Bulldogs, they are a top 2 team in the nation. Welcome back, Georgia football. Their fans deserve it. You guys all deserve it. It was a great win last night. And we will see how Georgia is able to do for the rest of the season in 2021 as they get prepared for what they hope for, what their fan base is hopeful the year that they finally take home a natty. So Georgia football, congrats. Congrats.